Okay, this is Mr. Burgess. We're going to start a little lesson today about squares, cubes, and their roots. So just a little different than what we've done the last couple of days, but certainly very, very important. So let's get going. So first of all, one of the math tools we use quite often is that of finding areas and volumes of different shapes. And one of the most basic shapes that we can find the area of is just a square. In order to find the area of a square, we just do length times the width, or length times the base, however they label it. So one side, the length of one side times the length of the other side. So what that might look like is this. We've got a square here. We need to measure how long it is. So in this case, our square is going to be 3 inches, or 3 units. So to find the area, we just do 3 times 3, which equals 9 square units. To further illustrate that, I'll go ahead and throw a grid over to the top of our square so you can see 9 boxes. So we multiplied by 3 times 3 to get the 9. And whenever we multiply the side times the side on a square like this, we say that we're actually squaring the number because we have a square here. So this would be 3 squared. If this had been 4 long and 4 wide, it would have been 4 squared. Or 5 by 5, it would have been 5 squared. And that's where the terminology squared comes from. All right, next. When we multiply 3 times 3, or 3 squared, we get 9. And we have 9 square units. And we can also do the opposite. If we want to work backwards from 9 to find out what we squared to get it, then we can do this. The square root of 9 takes us back to the number 3, which tells us what number was squared in the first place. Let's practice a few. So if we do the square root of 64, now every calculator is a little bit different. Let's just jump ahead of screen. Okay, I don't have a picture of my calculator, but the ones that are in our room right now, but I've got this one. And this one's a little different than some of the ones that you might be using, but I can still do the square root of 64. So I do 64, and then I hit my square root symbol, and it tells me that that's 8. So the square root of 64 is 8, and I can just type that in there, right? Okay, get my calculator back, and let's do 169. So 169 square root, so that would be 13. 625 square root, well, that's 25. And the last one, 289. So 289, take the square root. Well, that's a good old 17. So taking a square root is pretty easy, right? We kind of know how to do that already, but this is just a little bit of a review. Okay, now let's talk about cubes for a minute. Okay, if we take our square and then stretch it out in a third dimension, we end up with a cube. And so a cube has 6 squares on the outside edges. And in order to find what we call the volume of that cube, we just multiply by all 3 dimensions, length, width, and height. So in this case, you'd have 3 times 3 times 3, and that equals 27. So when you multiply these 3 dimensions together, that's like saying you are cubing the number. And that's why, because we're talking about the volume of a cube. So 3 cubed is 27. Okay, how about 5 cubed? Well, 5 cubed would be 125. 7 cubed, which is 7 times 7 times 7, would be 343. So cubing a number is not much more difficult than squaring a number. Now, what if I want to find the cube root, or start with a number and go back, okay? Well, before we do that, let's just cube a couple more numbers. On our calculators, you have to type in the number you want cubed, for example, 2, So if I put in a 2, then I hit the up arrow key and then the 3, it will cube that number, okay? So 2 to the third power would be 8. What about 6 to the third power? Well, that would be 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 36, well, let's get my calculator here. 6 times 36. So 6 to the third power will be 216. What about 3 to the third power? Well, that's 3 times 3, which is 9, and 3 times 9, 27. Then that last one, 7 to the third power, that's just 7 times 7 times 7, which equals 343. So there's how you find those particular cubes on a calculator. And like I said, to do it on our calculators, the ones that are posted in our room, this is the process that you do it. Okay, so 3. What if I wanted to do the opposite of cubing a number? I wanted to do the cube root. Well, then you would type it in like this on our calculator. You would type in a 3, meaning I want to take the cube root. Then I would hit the second key. Then I would hit the up arrow. And just above the up arrow is a key that looks like this. And when you go through this process, you actually are saying this thing to do the third root, or you're putting a 3 where x is. So you're doing the cube root. And then in each case, you just calculate the cube root. So the cube root of 27 would be 3. The cube root of 64 would be 4. What about these negative numbers? We got 343. So I'm going to find the cube root of 343. So on my calculator, I'm going to do 3, second, up arrow, negative 343 equals. And I end up with negative 7. Now, something to keep in mind, this is a cube root, not a square root. So when we were doing square roots, you couldn't find a square root. It was always giving us an error message. But if it's a cube root, it can be negative, because 3 negatives multiplied together gives me a negative answer, right? So now our last one, the cube root of negative 216. So the cube root, so second, I got to do 3 first, then second, then that little up arrow, and I put in the number negative 216. So the cube root of negative 216 is equal to negative 6. So this would just be negative 6. So that's how you cube a number and find the cube root. And there's our calculator. Here's the second key right here. Here's that up arrow. Here's that little thing above the up arrow that gives you what root it is that you want to take. Okay, now when we get into ALEKS, which you're going to do some today, it'll give you questions like this. Solve x squared equals 144. So what that means is it wants you to find the square root of x squared in order to get x. So the square root of x squared would be x. The square root of 144 would equal 12. Okay, how about the cube root of 343? So if I want to do the cube root of 343, I have to put the number 3 on my calculator. Second up arrow, 343. And that I was negative 343, so my answer is negative 7. And so you get the idea. Now, what if it's written like this, 64 equals y third? Well, you still want you to find the cube root of this number. So what is the cube root of 64? That equals 4. All right, so we can continue. What if we ask the question like this? Find the side length of a cube with a volume of 166 centimeters cubed. So you just do 166 and find the cube root of it, to find the dimensions of that volume. Okay, so we have an assignment on Alex. Make sure you show your work on each problem, and good luck. Thank you very much.